Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello and a very warm welcome our viewers to the first episode of the Meinhardt Podcast, the show that is brought to you by Meinhardt Middle East and North Africa, where we will be discussing the latest trends in engineering consultancy, and we will also be shedding some light on our colleagues' hidden talents, and we will be speaking about our most interesting projects. And for the first episode, I am honored to host a very special guest. Today we will be joined by the Group CEO of Meinhardt, Mr. Omar Shahzad. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Let's start from the very beginning. I know by study you actually graduated with an economics degree. Yeah. What got you into Meinhardt? What got you into the engineering consultancy in the first place?
Right, that's a great question. And, I was always someone who was more interested in finance and economics. And I knew from a very early age that that's my calling. And so I started my career in banking. And then in about 2009, the then CEO of Meinhardt Singapore, Dr. Naseem, who's now our chairman, launched a very audacious bid in the middle of the global financial crisis to buy out the entire Meinhardt group from the Meinhardt family at the time. And that is where he reached out to me and said, I need to put the financing together to do this. Thankfully, all the senior management of Meinhardt at the time all supported the MBO, the management buyout. And my role was to put the whole structure together, the transaction, put together a consortium of banks and investors. And by the grace of God, we were able to do this in 2010. It was very difficult because, it was a global financial crisis. People were very risk averse. And Meinhardt is a company which is all on intellectual brain power. The company has very few assets. In fact, our main assets are our people. So we were able to get a deal done in the time, which was the first of its kind. We got tremendous support from the Singapore government, but also from our staff, from our clients. And by the grace of God, we have never looked back.
Amazing. Was Meinhardt based in Singapore back then? Or did, if I'm not mistaken, the first headquarters was in Australia?
That's correct.
But then it moved to Singapore. So how did that happen?
So, of course, once the management buyout happened, we moved the HQ from Melbourne, Australia to Singapore. And it was very strategic because by moving the HQ to Singapore, Meinhardt became the largest privately held engineering company in Asia.
Wow.
And as I said, we got tremendous support from the Singapore government. And given the fact that we felt that the center of gravity was moving towards Asia at that point in time, and has been for a very long time in the case of Meinhardt, Singapore was so much more central. And the Singapore's urban development story is so exceptional too. So for all the right reasons, we moved the HQ to Singapore.
Amazing, amazing. And I would say the HQ moved to Singapore at a very challenging time.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next question. In 2024, what do you feel are the biggest challenges in the realm of engineering consultancy, especially when we're talking about sustainability these days and innovation? It's everywhere. Everybody's talking about green energy and net zero. How do you feel this forms a few challenges for engineering consultants?
I think there are many challenges confronting us in the built environment industry. Number one, projects are getting more and more complex. You see all the time, projects are very tall, very complex. Add to the complexity is the fact that timelines are becoming incredibly intense. Contractor supply chain is very stressed. So you need to work with all these constraints. And of course, people are very commercially driven these days. So you need to design and build these projects, not only in a short span of time, at a time when there's a lot of volatility, but also at a time when people are very price-driven. Interest rates are going up, etc. So, there's a lot of challenges that engineers are really at the heart of all of these challenges in terms of designing and implementing these projects are concerned. So that's the exciting part. The constraint is, of course, as the firms grow, you need to find good people who have the competence, but also people who have the right attitude. So we need to build a culture within the company that attracts and retain the right set of people who have the right attitude, the right expertise. Now, you mentioned sustainability. I think there are two mega trends in our industry. One is digitalization. How do we bring better productivity? So there are all these digital tools available. Construction itself is going through what we call design for manufacturing and assembly. So how do you design a project whereby the project can be, a lot of the work that's supposed to be traditionally done on site actually can be done in a factory environment.
True.
Then you actually just sort of build it up,
And with 3D
install,
printing and
assemble
pods, yeah.
exactly. And that's the way the industry is headed to. Meinhardt is very fortunate that about 10 years ago, we were responsible for putting together a study for the government of Singapore to do the roadmap for the future productivity and construction roadmap for Singapore Building Construction Authority. So that gave us really good insights. And on the back of that report, Singapore has moved towards that model, but so is the Middle East. So we have a bit of a head start. And then you talked about sustainability. About 150 countries, have signed up to bringing down the carbon footprint. UAE is at the forefront of this, especially after we hosted the COP conference last year. And, every project we do, the clients challenge us, we challenge ourselves. How do we bring sustainability to the fore? And last year, that was the theme of our global conference about sustainability. For every project that we do, we really look at sustainability, whether it's in the form of embodied carbon, whether it's in the form of operational performance. And it's something we must do more of every time we work on any project.
And maybe, this ties into, you mentioned, all the new technology coming out. In terms of technology and innovation, how is Meinhardt staying ahead of the market, let's say, ahead of our competitors? I know everybody's talking about AI these days. How do you think this forms a challenge for Meinhardt to stay ahead of everybody?
Right. Now, let me take you back a little bit. One thing that Meinhardt has been very proud of over our 75 years of history is that we have always been known as being very innovative, coming up with very cost-efficient and buildable solutions. And that's been the hallmark from Australia all the way here to Middle East. Clients and contractors look to us to come up with very sharp value engineering solutions. And if you go through our track record, there are many, many projects that, we may not have been the main engineers, but the client came to us because they thought the design was very heavy, or the contractor came to us. We re-engineered the project, and that's how the project got built, and that's how the project was viable. So that's been the history. If you look at Singapore, for example, many of the projects that we've designed, actually when that design went to the market, nobody came up with an alternative. And Singapore is one of the most cutthroat, competitive markets. And the same is true here in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in Qatar. So that's the history and legacy we're proud of. But obviously, nowadays with the technology which is growing and there's so much of it, we need to also rely not just on our people, but also bring the best of technology. Because as I said, one of the constraints we have is productivity. And there are many such initiatives that we're working on at different offices. We have a global committee for digital and technology, of which Dubai office is playing a major role on. And as you know, we have brought in teams for digital and tech and innovation that are working with our technical teams to come up with scripts, plugins, APIs, to see how we can improve the productivity, the efficiency, and cut down the risk of human error.
Are you excited about any particular new technology that's coming out? Is there anything that grabs your attention? First thing you think about?
I think one of the things that I'm very focused on is how does Meinhardt, because you see, we get involved from the early feasibility study, design. We have a very significant role during construction stage, either as the owner's engineer or as project managers. One of the things we're now looking at is how do we go to the facilities management and life cycle. How do we use our knowledge, especially our technical knowledge, and leverage that during the O&M phase? And so for that, we are coming up with some very intelligent solutions, which we'll unveil very soon, which will utilize and leverage AI And that's something I'm looking forward to towards the year end.
Very nice. You mentioned that there is a global movement in the Meinhardt offices. As the group CEO, how do you maintain, like we have about 60 offices around the world. How do you maintain the quality all around the world, making sure, the Meinhardt name always keeps answering and always keeps delivering?
It's very important to maintain that consistency because, at the end of the day, people look at Meinhardt as one company. And, we have our own formulas. Every company deals with it differently. But for us, I think one of the aspects that I'm most proud about is that we have grown almost entirely organically. And so by doing an organic growth model, we are able to have a better grip on people, culture, sharing of expertise, knowledge. So in the case of Meinhardt, obviously when we set up a new office, a bigger office, whether it's Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, they would have significant role in developing that office. Typically, some of the initial people that head up that office would be from an established Meinhardt office.
Okay.
And that's how the leadership is developed locally. Obviously, all the projects that are undertaken by those newer offices will be checked extensively by a larger Meinhardt office. Globally, we are divided into regions. So for the Middle East, that's a region that I've always taken a very strong liking to. So I personally oversee the region together with our leadership here in UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. And, try and make sure that we bring the best of Meinhardt. If it's a project which needs specific expertise, we're able to draw on the 60 offices to provide that level of expertise. And I think one of the values of Meinhardt is that we try and operate as one company. We have no, kingdoms or silos.
Yes.
And we are able to plug expertise from different offices and combine that to bring the very best value proposition to the client. And when we do that, of course, sometimes it's not possible to do that perfectly, but when we do that, we come out really well.
Amazing. And, I'm glad we were able to catch you on a busy day. I know you've been traveling all around the Middle East, but since we're in the UAE and we're talking about this right now, is there any specific project that comes to mind that really highlights the values of Meinhardt and how the Meinhardt name always delivers what's expected in the UAE?
When it comes to the UAE, I think, all our people in this office can be very proud of the rich history and legacy of projects we have undertaken, starting with Emirates Towers, Burj Al Arab. On those two projects, we were not the main engineers, but we were able to come up with an alternative design for the contractor. And that's how those projects were built. Then after that, we were involved with major projects like Dubai Mall, Dubai Marina Mall. We also got into infrastructure projects with the contractor, like on Dubai Metro. We worked on 2 major depots. So there's a rich history of projects that we have worked on, both past and present teams of Meinhardt. But currently, the one project that really stands out is the Moro Data Center. As we all know, this is a project which is 100% powered by sustainable renewable energy. And this has won the Guinness World of Records as the largest sustainable data center anywhere in the world. So it's a proud project both for the UAE and, of course, a very proud project for Meinhardt, successfully designed and completed, I think, within 12 to 13 months. So,
Yeah.
And I think, data centers and mission critical is a major growth focus for Meinhardt globally. And this is, again, an area where I think the UAE office will have a significant role to play, not just in the region, but way beyond.
Yes, mashallah. And actually, nowadays, you see the focus on data centers, and they're growing everywhere around the world. And the number of megawatts just keeps going up and up and up and up.
That's right, it's crazy. A few years ago, a 25 megawatt data center was considered massive. Today, we're talking about 150 megawatts, yes. 250 megawatts. The scale is just enormous.
Very nice. And I think Meinhardt is at the very front of data center design, yes. Yeah. Working alongside Dr. Naseem, our executive chairman, how do you balance all the new projects, all the new ideas with Meinhardt tradition? I'm sure, like
Yeah.
there's a challenge in there. So how do you balance that?
I think Dr. Naseem has played a very big role and continues to do so across the group. Many of the offices that Meinhardt now counts in his global network were set up by Meinhardt Singapore, but really single-headedly spearheaded by Dr. Naseem. And he always had this vision that while Singapore was a fast-growing market in the 80s and 90s, Singapore ultimately was a small country, and we needed to scale beyond. So, the Singapore office has been responsible for all the Middle East offices. Even the China offices were initially set up by Singapore.
Wow.
And he went all the way to the US. So we set up 2 offices back then in the US, all from Singapore. So I think that's something.
Sorry, I may interrupt you here.
Yeah.
On what basis was he choosing where to expand to?
Well, obviously it was based on, his intelligence in terms of growth markets. And quite frankly, a lot of times our existing clients were taking us to
so word
those
of mouth.
new
Nice.
geographies.
Nice.
And we're continuing that tradition. We have opened up so many more offices in the last few years. 10 years ago, we had 1 office in India. Today, we have at least 8 or 9 offices in India. Here in the Middle East, we are setting up offices in Iraq and Abu Dhabi, and very soon in Morocco. So it's a tradition we hold very dear, and it's something that I'm very focused on. But more than just expansion, Dr. Naseem was and is still a brilliant structural engineer. And a lot of the values I talked about for innovation, quality, were driven by him and the team that he inculcated. And it's something that we work very hard on to build quality control teams in each office and regions, and make sure that projects are properly set up, and a lot of the good ideas come at the front end of the design. So we must make sure we put our best brains behind to look at different aspects of design in terms of buildability, efficiency, new technologies. As you know, we have a very promising smart cities team. So how do we bring technology into the design phase and not as an afterthought?
Very nice. And since you're still talking about balance, I have a personal question now. How do you balance your work and life? You've got a lot to do. How are you able to manage that? And what do you do when you're in your free time? What are some of your hobbies? I like to discover the person behind the title, so let's talk about that a bit.
It's pretty hard when you're involved in a fast-growing, highly paced environment like Meinhardt. And sometimes, to be honest, you don't get the balance right. But I'm a very proud father of 3 kids.
MashaAllah.
So, obviously family is important.
Are they 3 boys, 3 girls?
I have 2 boys and a girl.
Wow, MashaAllah.
So sometimes I do miss out on spending enough time with them, but I try and make it up during the holiday seasons. And for me, there are 2. One is during the Christmas season. The other in Singapore is the Chinese New Year break. And then personally for me, during Ramadan is a time to spend time with the family and really enjoy the time, the blessings of that holy month. So I try and at least allocate some time to the family then. But personally, when I do have some time over the weekends, I try and do what I can in terms of managing my weight. So I play a bit of squash or go to the gym.
Very nice.
So every time I feel that I have problems getting into my pants, that's the time when I know I need to do something either about the diet or work out a little bit. And I'd love to catch up with you and get some tips from you as well.
Amazing. And since you're in Dubai, and it's really hot right now, everybody's into indoor paddle. So, if you're into squash, you're gonna love.
Okay.
Have you tried paddle?
No, not yet. We'll do it together.
Definitely. I'm no paddle expert though.
Same here.
Sir Omar, one last question. Mashallah, you've been quite successful and you've driven Meinhardt forward to new fronts and new places. What advice would you give to somebody who's new in the field of engineering consultancy, or for an aspiring student who wants to become an engineer or an entrepreneur in the future, to be able to drive such success in their own career?
Yeah. From my perspective, I think the work that we do as engineers, project managers, is one that has a lot of promise. This industry is changing every day. It's not a sunset industry. Sometimes, we think it's such a hard life in this industry, but it's not. This is one of the biggest industries in the world. About 7 to 10% of the global economy is actually design and construction, and it's only going to grow over time. So there are plenty of opportunities, and whether you love engineering, whether you're into the digital side of it, whether you're into managing contracts, using your interpersonal skills to work with different stakeholders, there's a lot to be done. And hopefully Meinhardt provides you that right platform to grow personally, work on larger projects, because at the end of the day, I feel a lot of people who come into this industry are inspired by the technical challenges. And Meinhardt, at any given time, we work on some of the most complex projects around the world. So hopefully you get that, but you're able to bring in new ideas, innovation. And one of the things I'm very proud of at Meinhardt is we provide people a very entrepreneurial platform. And we will stretch you as much as you like to be stretched.
You actually made me think of one more question. Meinhardt is into a lot of fields right now, a lot of applications. But what is one application you would want to also join in the future? I know Meinhardt is in the UAE at least is not doing much in the energy sector, So is this one sector you'd like to delve in, or what is, something you would also want to move Meinhardt forward to delve into in the future?
I think I'll say two. You mentioned sustainability, and I think that's something we already have teams in place, both within our MEP business, but also in our smart city business. We have specific MEP teams. We are also now able to support companies, especially property developers, real estate developers, to craft their ESG journeys. So you'll see a lot more emphasis on that as we go along, especially here in UAE and from UAE to the rest of the region. So that's something we'll be spending a lot more effort on. And the second business you'll see us expanding into is our construction management business. We have built up over the last 10 years a very successful EPCM business that's now scaling into EPC in very limited areas. And I think that's something we've missed out. And given the challenges of construction here, because of the scale, magnitude of projects, I think that's something that you will see our offices here in UAE, Saudi Arabia, building up very quickly. So those are the two areas of Meinhardt that hopefully starting, as early as later this year, you'll hear a lot more.
Amazing. Looking forward to that. And our dear guests, it's a pleasure having Mr. Omar here. There's so much more I'd like to talk about, but inshallah, we'll have you on another episode and we'll delve more into Mr. Omar. That's behind the title, inshallah.
Meinhardt, transforming cities, shaping the future.